For 31 years, Walter Pruitt cut the grass at Ashford Manor, and nobody thought twice about him. He wore the same brand of work boots until they fell apart, then bought the same pair again. He ate lunch alone on the same bench by the rose garden, out of the same tin lunchbox every single day of his working life. Tuna on Mondays, ham on Wednesdays, nothing on Fridays, because Fridays, he used to joke to no one in particular, were for finishing early. He drove a 2004 Ford pickup with a dented tailgate, the kind of truck people joked about in the parking area when they thought he couldn't hear them. He never asked for a raise. He never took a vacation. He never once complained to anyone about anything, as far as the staff could remember. If you had passed him on the grounds of Ashford Manor, you likely wouldn't have looked twice. That was, in a strange way, exactly how he wanted it. Thomas Whitfield had been the estate manager at Ashford Manor for just over a year when Walter Pruitt collapsed near the greenhouse on a quiet Tuesday morning in October. Thomas was 29 years old, well-educated, well-dressed, the kind of young man who had been told his whole life that he was destined for something impressive, and who had, so far, mostly believed it. He managed a staff of 11, oversaw a budget in the millions, and reported directly to a family whose name was etched into half the buildings in the county. Walter Pruitt to Thomas had simply always been part of the scenery, reliable, silent, unremarkable. Thomas had said something close to that once, over a glass of wine with his fiancée, meaning it kindly, meaning it as pity rather than cruelty. Some people just never get a real shot, he'd said, glancing out toward the dark lawn beyond the restaurant window. Walter's one of them. Good at his job, sure, but that's it. That's the whole story. He would remember that sentence for a very long time. He would wish, more than once, that he could take it back. The morning it happened was ordinary in every way until it wasn't. Fog sat low across the grounds. The gardener's radios crackled with the usual chatter about the week's frost warning. And then, just past 8 o'clock, one of the junior groundskeepers came sprinting toward the main house, out of breath, saying Walter was down by the greenhouse and wasn't getting up. The ambulance arrived quickly. It made no difference. Walter Pruitt was pronounced dead at 74 years old of a sudden cardiac event, alone among the plants he had tended for 3 decades. There was no family listed anywhere in his employment file, no next of kin, no emergency contact, except for the name and number of a small law office in the next town over. A firm Thomas had never once heard mentioned in 14 months of running the estate. And so, almost by default, it fell to Thomas to handle what came next, to clear out Walter's belongings from the small caretaker's cottage that sat at the far edge of the property, tucked behind a stand of old oak trees, mostly forgotten by anyone who didn't need to walk past it. Thomas expected the task to take less than an hour. A cot, some flannel shirts, maybe a stack of worn-out sports magazines, and a few tools that belonged to the estate anyway. He brought a single empty box with him, certain it would be more than enough. What he found instead was a life that made absolutely no sense to him. The cottage was small, but it was spotless, almost monastic in how little it contained. In the single-bedroom closet hung 6 identical work shirts, pressed and evenly spaced. 6 identical pairs of work pants beneath them. 1 good jacket, kept only, it seemed, for funerals, still smelling faintly of cedar. In the kitchen, a percolator older than Thomas himself sat beside a single chipped mug on a counter, wiped clean of even a crumb. A small wooden shelf held a modest collection of paperback books, most of them about gardening and roses, and one, oddly, about long-term investing. Its spine cracked and soft from what looked like decades of use. Thomas almost missed the metal desk tucked into the corner of the room, half covered by a folded blanket. He almost left the room without opening its drawers at all. But something he would say later made him stop. In the bottom drawer, inside a plain, worn manila folder, he found the first financial statement. It was from a major low-cost index fund. Account holder, Walter J. Pruitt. Balance as of the end of September, $2,186,000. Thomas sat down hard on the edge of Walter's narrow, neatly made bed and read that number 3, then 4 times, absolutely certain it had to belong to someone else. Certain a document this large had somehow been misfiled into an old man's kitchen drawer by mistake. But behind that statement was another, and behind that one, another still. The balance is growing smaller and smaller the further back in time he went. Page after page, year after year, like rings inside a tree trunk. Finally, at the very bottom of the stack, he reached the beginning. A modest opening deposit of $300 made in 1985. The same year Walter turned 25. The same year he had taken the groundskeeper's job at Ashford Manor for an annual salary of $11,000. Tucked behind that very first statement was a single sheet of lined paper, written in Walter's own steady hand, dated exactly 3 years before his death. It wasn't addressed to any name in particular. It simply began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably confused. Thomas kept reading and didn't move from that bed for a very long time. Walter wrote that he had never made much money in his life and had never once needed to. From his very first paycheck at Ashford Manor, he had made himself a simple, almost stubborn rule: 20% off the top before he allowed himself to spend a single dollar anywhere else. He called it paying himself first and pretending, quite deliberately, that the rest of the money simply didn't exist. Every single month for 31 years, without exception, that 20% went into the very same low-cost index fund. In good markets, in terrible ones. Through recessions, he never once mentioned to a single co-worker. Through years when the newspaper screamed that the sky was falling, and years when everyone around him seemed to be getting rich overnight in things he didn't understand and had no interest in chasing, he wrote that he had made himself one more rule, just as strict as the first. He would check the balance no more than twice a year, once in January, once in July. Not because he didn't care, he explained, but because he understood something most people never quite learn, that looking too closely, too often, only tempts a man into making some clever little change he will almost certainly come to regret. The market, he wrote, rewards patience and punishes fidgeting, and he had simply decided a long time ago not to fidget. He wrote that people had always assumed his old truck, his worn boots, and his quiet lunches on the same bench meant he had nothing to his name, and that he had let them go right on believing it year after year, without correcting a single one of them. Being underestimated, he wrote, was the most peaceful way he had ever found to move through the world. Nobody asks a poor man for money. Nobody envies him. Nobody corners him at a dinner party to explain what he ought to be doing differently with funds he never talks about. He said the silence itself had become a kind of freedom, maybe even the real fortune, long before the number in his account ever became one. He wrote that he had no children and no family left that he was close to, and that the money itself, in the end, had never really been the point. The real point, he said, had been proving something to himself, quietly, year after year, decade after decade, with no audience and no applause, that a man who lived beneath his means and refused to panic and refused to chase could out-earn almost anyone shouting about money at dinner tables and cocktail parties. The market, he wrote, doesn't care how smart you sound in a conversation. It only ever rewards the people who stay in the room year after year, when it would be so much easier to walk away. The letter ended with instructions, written as plainly and simply as everything else about the man. The bulk of the estate, just over $2,100,000, was to be divided 2 ways. The first and larger portion would fund a scholarship, set up quietly through that small law office, for the children of groundskeepers and estate staff, at properties just like Ashford Manor, so that a few kids somewhere might get, as Walter put it, an actual real shot. The second, smaller portion was placed into a separate trust. That trust had a name written across the top of it, in Walter's same steady handwriting, Thomas Whitfield. Beneath it, one final line. You looked at me like I had wasted my life. I want you to have some of what that wasted life actually built. Spend it slower than I did, and you'll end up with more than I ever had. Thomas sat alone in that small cottage for a very long time after he finished reading, the letter resting in his lap, the light through the small window shifting slowly from morning grey to something warmer. Outside, the lawn Walter had cut every single week for 31 years was still perfectly, evenly trimmed, almost as if the old man had somehow known exactly how much time he had left and had made absolutely sure the grass would quietly outlast the question of who he really was. Thomas never told anyone at Ashford Manor how much shame he carried through that week, or how many nights he lay awake replaying that careless sentence from the dinner table. But he did close out his own credit card balance before the month was over. He opened his first index fund 15 days after Walter's funeral with an amount that felt embarrassingly small compared to the number he had seen in that drawer. And he set up one automatic transfer, 20% off the top, exactly as Walter had described it in his letter, that Thomas has never once, in all the years since, turned off. He still visits the scholarship fund's first recipients every spring, quietly, without telling anyone at the office where he's going. And to this day, he cannot drive past a dented or pickup truck parked in some ordinary lot without slowing down just a little. Out of respect for a silence he almost spent his whole career failing to understand. Because the loudest lesson Walter Pruitt ever taught, he taught without ever saying a single word out loud while he was alive. Some of the richest people you will ever meet will never once look like it. And some of the poorest looking people you pass without a second glance may be the wealthiest ones